The hype train is full speed ahead for the upcoming Eternals movie. While you've probably heard about these long-lived comic book characters, you might be wondering where Kit Harington's Dane Whitman fits into all of this. And why was he caught locking lips with actress Gemma Chan on the set of the film? Let's take a look at their relationship and why the Black Knight is being included in a movie about the Eternals. While I'm excited to see him on the big screen, will this give the Black Knight enough time to shine? A Black Knight has been a literary trope since, well, probably since there were actual knights running around. Or running as well as they can in those massive suits of armor. It's an easy way to say that this is an evil character who keeps his identity hidden, but that's not the case when it comes to Dane Whitman. But it might surprise you to know that he's not the first Black Knight in Marvel comic books, or in his own family. In the world of the comics, there was once Sir Percy of Scandia, who was the heroic Black Knight you probably remember from the stories about King Arthur. One of his descendants was a professor named Nathan Garrett, who didn't quite inherit his ancestors' charisma or his moral fortitude. He was great at science, but not so much when it came to being a hero. After he inherited Garrett Castle, Sir Percy's spirit visited him and asked him to take up his sword and fight against the forces of evil. How can you turn down such a reasonable request from a spooky ghost? But unfortunately for Nathan, he wasn't deemed worthy and was unable to draw the sword from its scabbard, thus ending his superhero career before it even started. Disappointing his ancestors and failing to obtain the weapon didn't help to improve Nathan's disposition. He decided to veer hard in the other direction and start up an espionage ring selling secrets of the American government to other companies. Once he was on the wrong side of the law, he decided to become an evil Black Knight. So take that, ghost of Sir Percy! After a long and distinguished career in villainy, Nathan eventually repented moments before he perished, leaving his castle and the legacy of the Black Knight in the hands of his nephew Dane Whitman. Inheriting a spooky castle is awesome, but finding out your uncle was a villain is much less so. But unlike Nathan Garrett, Dane didn't have any trouble wielding the Ebony Blade, and immediately decided to devote his life to being a hero. While that may have been a solid idea, the way he went about it ended up getting him into a whole lot of trouble. In a seemingly contrary move, his first act as a hero was to join up with the Masters of Evil, just as his uncle had years before. Now, he wasn't just really bad at being a hero. He wanted to infiltrate the organization and destroy them from the inside out. Needless to say, his fellow heroes didn't exactly see things that way, and considered him a villain until he helped them out in a fight against Kang the Conqueror. He fought side by side with the Avengers for a while, and the group found his scientific knowledge to be a useful asset. Jon Snow is famous for knowing nothing, but Dane Whitman knows at least a handful of different things. They might not be at quite the same level as Tony Stark or Hank Pym, but when they were indisposed, Dane was able to fill in. Once he made peace with the Avengers and started fighting crime, there was still one major problem, and that was the Black Knight's Ebony Blade. This enchanted sword once belonged to Sir Percy himself and was a gift from the wizard Merlin. The good news is that Sir Percy got a lot of use out of that sword. The bad news is that all of that fighting ended up tainting the blade and afflicting it with a curse. It spent some time in the hands of the Knights Templar before eventually being acquired by Dane. The sword was back in the family, but it was definitely still wicked cursed. The sword and its wielder share a bond. In exchange for some great magic powers, there's a price to pay for using the Ebony Blade. On the plus side, an enchantment Merlin put on it means that the wielder cannot lose their life while they're using it. They can be badly maimed, but they'll live. The only exception to this rule is if their attacker is using a weapon made of the same starstone the blade was forged with. Another big bonus is that the wielder can deflect magical attacks, and can even absorb energy intended to inflict damage. It can cut through almost anything with exceptions for other enchanted weapons and near impenetrable materials like adamantium. Because the wielder and the blade share a bond, Dane can find himself reunited with his weapon, even if that means his spirit is now in his ancestor's body. But there's a definite downside to this link that has nothing to do with time travel or Freaky Friday scenarios. Every drop of blood spilled by the wielder taints the blade. The more the sword is used, the more it hungers to be wielded, and this insatiable desire to fight is passed on to whoever's using it. Like Mjolnir, the Ebony Blade also has a worthiness requirement. Only worthy people can resist becoming the Blood Wraith, and only for so long. If you think Dane's relationship with his weapon is complicated, just wait until you hear about his romantic life. At one point, he found himself involved in a love triangle with Crystal and the Eternal Sersi. Although his feelings for Crystal were deep, there was just one little problem. She was married to Quicksilver. When they decided to work on their marriage, Dane decided to commit full force to Sersi, who was dealing with some complicated mental health issues at the time. They were really complicated, since a parallel universe version of Dane called Proctor was psychically tormenting her. Dane agreed to become Sersi's Ganjosin, which means that they would become linked to one another. The Eternals hoped matching up their brain waves would help Sersi regain her sanity, and Sersi apparently wasn't put off by the fact that Dane was already in a serious soul bond with his sword. Even after Sersi defeated Proctor, she wasn't confident in her ability to remain sane, so she willingly exiled herself and Dane went along for the ride. Eventually, they ended up in the Ultraverse, and Dane became a member of the Ultra Force, a group of heroes. He later became their leader, and it took quite some time to get back to his own version of Earth, and the correct point in time. His bond with Sersi was severed, and they just kinda went their separate ways. I know, I can't believe it didn't work out between these two crazy kids either. I know the story of the Black Knight is pretty out there, but hey, that's comic books for you. There are a few reasons Marvel could have chosen this movie to introduce Dane Whitman into the MCU. The first is obviously his relationship with Sersi. Even though it ultimately didn't work out, it was still an important interlude for both of these characters, particularly for Sersi. The on-set kiss between Gemma Chan and Kit Harington seems to prove that this is definitely going to be incorporated into the film. But what about Dane's other, arguably more important relationship? That's right, I'm talking about the connection between the Black Knight and the Ebony Blade. In the comic books, the sword is passed down until it eventually finds its way into Dane's hands. The Eternals have been around for hundreds of thousands of years, and this movie promises to fill in some gaps in the history of the MCU. It's thought that we'll see some scenes which take place at least 1,000 years ago. This could easily mean that we see the origins of the Ebony Blade as well as the point where Dane acquires it. We haven't seen Merlin in the MCU yet, and it seems like Marvel is trying to go slowly into the whole magic thing. It would be simple enough to alter the sword's origins and possibly implicate the Eternals in its creation. If Marvel goes that route, my money's on Fastus, who will be portrayed by Brian Tyree Henry. He's a weaponsmith who loves crafting as much as he hates fighting. In fact, when push comes to shove and he has to fight, he starts calling himself Ceasefire, just to give you an idea of how over it this guy is. In the comics, Dane is able to cleanse the blade of its taint by casting it into the brazier of truth. It's possible that he'll be looking for a method to cleanse the blade in this movie, and that could put him into the path of Sersi and the other Eternals. It's also been wielded by other people over the years, including the Black Panther T'Challa. That could definitely be an interesting aspect of its history to include at some point in the MCU. But there are plenty of reasons to be excited about the Black Knight joining the MCU that doesn't have anything to do with his possible connection to other characters, or to his sword. As far as his talents go, Dane is a smart guy, and as you can probably imagine, he's an incredible swordsman. In fact, he even defeated the swordsman at one point in the comics. He's skilled at hand-to-hand combat and is on par with heroes like Captain America. He's a master tactician, he knows a thing or two about magic, and he's quite the equestrian. Okay, maybe that one doesn't sound too cool until you know that he's had horses who could fly. Everyone knows flying horses are way cooler than the regular kind. Over the years, Dane has been turned into a statue, he's traveled through time, and he's helped Thor defend Asgard against the Egyptian god Set. He might not be the most overpowered character in the Marvel Universe, but he's definitely an interesting one. And let's not forget that the Avengers ranks are at an all-time low after the events of Avengers Endgame. He might not be quite as smart as Tony Stark, but being still alive is really a big bonus. The Black Knight and Sersi both fought for the Avengers, so it's possible that they'll help out the team at some point in the movie, or at least what's left of it. In the early days of the MCU, the romances were often less than compelling, but that's been less of an issue in more modern movies. Not only are Dane and Sersi both interesting characters, but their relationship is almost indescribably weird, and I mean that in the best way possible. Thanks to movies like Doctor Strange and the inclusion of time travel, Marvel has really been ramping up the weirdness on the big screen, and personally, I can't be the only one who wants more of it. If Dane and Sersi are going to be smooching, I hope it happens with a maximum amount of goofiness. Are you excited to see the Black Knight make his MCU debut in the Eternals? Or do you wish he was getting his very own movie? Let us know what you think in the comments section below. And then click on that subscribe button to get access to more new videos from us here at CBR. As always, thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.